no-go pathway, resisting movement. And the no-go pathway degenerates substantially, other things too. And people with Huntington's chorea end up with these writhing ballistic movements. And it's an inherited disease. So you know what gene, it's the Huntington gene. And if you know that your, for instance, parent has it, you can get tested for it. A lot of people don't want to get tested. They don't want the answer because it's late onset. So you can be normal a certain portion of your life and then get it. It's a tragic disease. But if you test positive for this gene, you know you're going to get Huntington's. In which case, with CRISPR, you could just put the gene back in and rescue function.
What causes someone to eventually succumb to that disease? If it's a late onset disease, if they don't have it when they're young and they develop when they get older, what changes?
Yeah, so it's not just deterioration of those particular neurons, it's deterioration of the neurons that control those neurons. And everything's working in a kind of a top-down suppression all the time. In fact, the head neurosurgeon at Neuralink, who's somebody I know quite well named Matthew McDougall, he came up through my laboratory, and Elon made a great choice in hiring him, told me recently, the best way to think about the frontal cortex is that basically its main job, besides picking context and strategy for a given situation, is to tell certain parts of your brain that really want to do things, shh. That's the best description I have ever heard of prefrontal cortex. You know, it's what's keeping Jamie from doing things that he shouldn't right now, and me doing things that I shouldn't right now. And every time you have a crazy idea, like, maybe I should jump off this bridge. Why would I think that? I'm not. That's a healthy operation of your brain saying, I want to because I'm kind of curious, but I don't want to, so I'm not going to.
Right.
With Huntington's, what happens is there's slow deterioration of those neurons, but there's a lot of deterioration of these neurons that control motor function. And eventually what happens is the deeper neurons that control motor function start shutting down the autonomic functions like breathing, heart rate. And so eventually people just succumb to some basic we call them housekeeping functions. You know, so they'll have to be on a respirator, and they have to they have to use a catheter tube, and they have to defecate into a bag, and at some point they just become a deteriorated mess of neurons. So what's first to go there, however, is the control of motor function, and it goes first in the direction of too much activity because of all these brakes and accelerators that we have in the brain. So in any case, CRISPR, gene manipulation of the sort that this guy did in this laboratory in China, again, I think an ethics committee needs to tell the world or decide for the world what people should be allowed to do and not do. But you can imagine for something like Huntington's, it would be tremendously advantageous. Like if you had a child who you knew would someday and then Huntington's, you'd want to do other things CRISPR mutation and put the healthy gene back.
Is there anything that's been shown to slow down the progress of Huntington's?
There I'm not so versed. It's a little bit like MS, another neurodegenerative disease, multiple sclerosis, where certain things exacerbate it, like inflammation of any kind. And those things can be almost random in some ways. Like some people who have MS will eat salad dressing with mustard in it, have a huge inflammatory response and have a flare-up, blurry vision, and get worse. And then it returns to
mustard.
Things like mustard, because
mustard inflammatory?
Well, mustard isn't necessarily whole body inflammatory, but if it's spicy mustard, it binds to what's called the substance P receptor or the capsaicin receptor. We have receptors for anything that's kind of hot and spicy, and those are the same receptors that respond to hot liquid. Heat and spicy, obviously, very, very closely linked, and pain, all three of those very close. Whereas pain relief, very closely related to menthol and cool. Not just the taste, but the actual physical sensation of cool. So heat, pain, and inflammation kind of are cousins in this sense, and cool, menthol, and lack of inflammation are also cousins in terms of receptors, neural circuits, this kind of thing.
So can spicy food cause inflammation?
Sure. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. But I think one of the best ways to think about inflammation, and here I definite hat tip to Lane Norton, who we both know, and Andy Galpin, who both really impressed upon me the fact that if we were to measure somebody's blood pressure, inflammatory markers, heart rate, and cortisol during a hard workout, and you didn't know they were doing a hard workout, I just handed you the data, and you're a medical doctor, you'd say, this person's dying.
Right.
So inflammation is robust during hard exercise. But I think what's so incredible about the human body is that the increase in blood pressure, inflammation, et cetera, is what triggers the adaptation so that blood pressure and inflammation, et cetera, are all much lower the other 23 hours of the day. And so there's something special about our system whereby, maybe if you had really hot peppers, like the most famous of these is the Carolina Reaper. You know about this? The Carolina Reaper.
I have some in my hot sauce. Yeah.
Someone ate.
Senor Lechuga made me this trio of hot sauces.
There's
And then there's Reapers in there.
is that a person or a brand? Senor Lechuga.
It's a brand.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be awesome
There's
if-
3 hot sauces that we developed. One of them is my friends over at Half Face Blades. They developed this one that I really like, so he added that to my little 3 collection, and it's like, I think it's Reapers, sun-dried tomatoes, and some other stuff, and truffles. It's really good.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then he's got 2 other ones. One of them with habanero, but there it is. Those are the 3. What happened? Yeah, so if you like hot shit, I like it hot. This stuff is like legit. So one of them is heirloom tomatoes, winter truffles, and Reapers. That's the Half Face Blades cooperative. And then the other one is, I don't even know how to say that word, chulacale. How do you say that?
I'm not chill.
Chulacale.
I'm in Texas. I'll embarrass myself even
Get your
more.
cursor off that, please. Colima salt and ghost pepper. That one's rough. It's really delicious though. And the other one's habanero, urfa chili, and paprika. And I love them all.
Yum.
But I like really hot.
Well,
like if you're like, boy, this Tabasco is rough, stay the fuck away from that stuff. Because the stuff I like is pretty rough.
Well, the Carolina Reaper in small amounts, I'm sure can spice it just right. There are these pepper eating contests that people.
Oh, I've seen them. We've played them on the podcast.
So a few years back, somebody ate a Carolina Reaper and ended up with what's called thunderclap headache. Thunderclap headache is a massive inflammation of the meninges of the brain. So you got your brain, it's sitting in fluid, everyone knows that. And then there's some thick dura stuff around it. There's thick fibrous tissue. Like, well, you're a hunter, so when you want to take the brain out, people think, oh, you just kind of pop the brain out. You need a sharp razor or really sharp scissors to get through, or a sharp knife. The swelling of the meninges is what happened to this person. They got an unbelievable headache, and it's actually inflammation-induced brain damage. Now, that's only eating an extremely hot pepper in huge quantities.
How many peppers did this guy eat?
I don't know. I think
just eating one of those things. Like, in the pepper sauce, my stuff, it's like the tiniest amount. It'll wreck you.
Yeah, thunderclap headache. We know a couple other things about spice. And here I want to make sure I give proper attribution. The Nobel Prize was given a couple of years ago to a guy down at the Scripps Institute in San Diego, Ardem Patapuchin, and David Julius at UCSF for the discovery of these receptors for pressure, cool, heat. And it's an amazing set of discoveries that just occurred really in the last 10 years. We know that all of those pathways go to areas of the brain that are involved in, of course, like behavior. Like if you touch something really hot or you taste something really hot, for most people, they're going to resist that. But also to the hypothalamus, which houses all these hormone control areas, et cetera. People who can tolerate stronger spice, men and women, we know it's correlated with higher levels of circulating testosterone. That, I think, is interesting. What we're really talking about is higher pain threshold. And you and I have talked before about if there's one clear effect of testosterone, it's that it makes effort feel good. That pain starts to have a little bit of a come hither kind of thing to it. It feels a little bit enticing when testosterone levels are elevated. When testosterone levels are lower, or if people have lower levels of testosterone, effort feels more overwhelming. How's that? And the other thing is that ingestion of spicy peppers resets your calibration for what's spicy. I think we know that too. And in a way that also adjusts people's pain threshold. So if people get better at eating hot peppers, they're better at dealing with all types of pain. And I find this fascinating because I know you and I are both kind of obsessed with ice baths and cold plunges. Yeah. And I've been going deep into that literature around cold and what's really known about cold thermogenesis and not known. And it seems like these acute adrenaline, acute pain pathways, they do exactly what exercise does, which is in the moment, if you were to measure somebody's inflammation, et cetera, you'd say this person is dying. They're in a terrible state. They might as well be getting, open heart surgery with no anesthesia, the way some people react to the ice bath. It's kind of silly to us, but for people that don't like the cold, they're like, you gotta be kidding me. I'd never go near it. They try and disparage it. They try and poke every hole in the data. They're just scared, right?
Yeah.
They're just scared. We know this. But they are actually the people that benefit the most because that really acute adrenaline spike, that pain that you feel creates a higher pain threshold later, higher threshold for work output. all the things that most people seek. And so to me, it's always interesting that you have to look what's happening during and you have to look at what's happening afterward. And for some reason, as humans, we like these creature comforts of massages, which are great. The sauna, which is great, although if you crank it up really hot, it's work at some level.
It's always work at the end.
There's that
The
moment.
last 5 minutes of a 25-minute session at 190 degrees, that's work.
Yeah, and there's something about the burning in the nose for me. At least my heart rate starts like I want to get the hell out.
Burning in the nose. So are you using water on the rocks a lot?
Yeah.
So that's what's giving you the burning in the nose?
Yeah. It's always hard to know how hot it is right at the place where it reaches your body. But I've been cranking it way, way up.
Like what temperature?
Like 260.
What?
260, but I cover
260.
But I cover my head.
Why?
So
What are you, a brisket?
No,
the fuck are you doing?
Well, what I found is
why are you doing that?
so what's interesting is your desire to get out of the hot tub or the too hot tub is because of burning on the skin, right? But your desire to get out of the sauna is usually a brain thing. You'll notice this because if you go to a Russian banya, they all wear the little wool hats.
Yeah.
That's to insulate their brain against the heat so they can stay in at hotter temperatures on their body. So I'm in at 260, but I've got my head covered with a wool cap. So it doesn't feel as stressful. But I'm doing it because I like to sweat.
But if it doesn't feel as stressful, wouldn't it have less of a positive effect?
Okay, so this is great because what you're starting to do is tease out the variables. So this is where I think it gets interesting. You can get better at sweating. I know fighters do this in preparation, dropping weight. You can get better by doing more sauna. You get it to be a better sweater, which means that you can cool more easily, even in clothes or if you're out running or hunting or doing anything. So there's some advantage to being better at sweating. And sweating itself is a whole interesting story. You actually have nerves that control the sweat glands. That's actually controlled by little nerve endings. And those pathways can grow very, very quickly in the presence of heat. So what I've been trying to do is learn how to dump heat better. And if I don't use the hat, what happened was I was getting up to 220 and I'd sit in there for like 45 minutes. I'm thinking, this is not doing anything for me anymore. I want to increase my sweating.
Have you brought in an independent thermometer?
You're not trusting the 260?
No.
No. So what I did is I haven't. So
Who makes your sauna?
This is Dundalk. But so what I had the guy do who had installed it for me is put the thermometer down low because it's a trigger, right? It's going to shut it off when it hits a certain temperature.
Yeah.
So what I'm really trying to do is get it really, really hot down near the floor because then when I stand up when it's that hot, I'm just ready to pass out. No chance.
Yeah.
But I think Laird, I don't want to get this wrong on the numbers, but I know Laird brings his Airdyne bike in there.
Mm-hmm. With oven mitts on.
So he's got to be putting himself at least 260, right? I mean,
himself? I don't think he has his sauna set at 260.
No.
I think his sauna set in the 200s, though. I think it's like 215 or 220.
But pedaling on the Airdyne, that's
he's a psycho.
Yeah, that's psycho.
But he's a different kind of human being.
Yeah. But I'm contrasting this with cold.
Yeah.
And so
that's a difference. Are you going cold and then 260?
I'm a wimp. I start in the cold for a minute, then I go into the sauna, then back into the cold for 2 minutes, back into the sauna, then 3 minutes.
But you're not a wimp. Why are you saying that?
Well, listen, if I were tougher, I'd go 5 minutes in the cold straight off.
Yeah.
But I just had Susanna Soberg out for a podcast, and she taught me some really interesting things. First of all, this has really helped. I did this.
We should explain that she's the woman who created the Soberg principle.
Yeah. Susanna Soberg did her PhD in Denmark. Is I think one of the best scientists in terms of deliberate cold exposure and its benefits, because she actually did something that's remarkable, not just in that field but overall, which is that she employed real world type experiences and exercise of deliberate cold and sauna and turned it into a very rigorous study of brown fat thermogenesis, which is this think of it as sort of your, like the oil in the candle of your body, increases mitochondrial function, and thermogenesis heats you up, metabolism, subjective well-being, sleep, etc. She did all of that and published this in Cell Reports Medicine. And I realize it's just one study, but to do that studies on humans is hard. To do it with multiple variables is even harder. And to do it in a real world context is even harder. So what she showed was that if people get 11 minutes of deliberate cold exposure per week total, and this is divided up into sessions of 1 to 3 minutes or 4 minutes even, so it's not 11 minutes all at once, they fundamentally change the amount of brown fat that they have which means they fundamentally change the number of mitochondria in the brown fat, which means they fundamentally change their thermogenic properties of their body, increase their metabolism. Now, the people who don't like cold say, well, the increase in metabolism wasn't enough to offset more than a few bites of a bagel or something. But that's not the point, really. What she also showed was that this increase in thermogenesis allowed people to be more comfortable in cold environments, even when they're not in the cold. And then people say, well, who cares, right? I'll throw on a jacket. But what she was able to show is that the ability to be comfortable in the cold correlates with a bunch of other important immune functions and metabolic functions and insulin sensitivity, which is a good thing. And the inability to do that is likely to not be healthy for us. She also showed that 57 minutes per week is the threshold for sauna. So if people get 57 minutes per week of uncomfortably warm but safe sauna exposure, they can get very similar effects. And then that gave rise to this question I always said, do you end with cold or do you end with heat? And she said, end with cold because then your body's forced to warm itself back up. And that's what's now called the Soberg principle, which is when you end with cold, your body has to use its natural machinery to heat back up. In talking to her recently, I learned some really interesting things that I've been incorporating. First of all, I've always avoided putting my head under until the very end in the cold. Turns out that if you put your face in the water right as you go in, you activate the mammalian dive reflex. And this reflex increases the so-called parasympathetic activity of the autonomic nervous system, which is just nerd speak for it lowers your heart rate, it makes you calmer, and it makes you better able to tolerate stress. So try this next time. You could even just put your face in before.
I go right under.
You go right under. Yeah. So that's the right way to do it.
Plug my nose, I go right under.
So I didn't know this. A lot of people that do deliberate cold get headaches, they don't feel good, and a lot of times it's because they slowly immerse themselves up to the neck. And then right at that interface of cold and hot, it creates change, vasoconstriction right below, a little bit vasodilation above. They get headaches, they don't feel good, their heart rate is way too high. Putting your face under
Isn't
really
that
helps.
anxiety, though? I just feel like that's all psychological. I really do, because there's a moment when you get in the cold where there's a part of your brain that goes, let's get out of here. You can get out of this if you will just get out right now. And you got to go, shut the fuck up. But if you don't say shut the fuck up, then that thing runs rampant through your brain. And that kicks your heart rate up, and that kicks your anxiety up. I really think it's psychological.
Well, it's psychological and it's physiological. So here's
physiological because of psychological.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So here's what we know for sure. For the first 20 to 30 seconds of cold shock when you get in, which is how it's described, that prefrontal cortex that normally has the job of handling context and says shh to the reflexes of the brain and the impulses of the brain is not active for 20 to 30 seconds. So your reflex to get the hell out of there is there's a clear and logical reason for that. After that 20 or 30 seconds, the forebrain starts coming online again. That's your opportunity to start negotiating with yourself of, oh, this is actually good for me. This is, I can handle this. I got through that, so I can get through the next one. What I've been doing recently is trying to not go for time, but going for, the only way I can describe this would be walls. Like sometimes just getting in the thing is a wall for me. So I go, okay, I got over one wall just getting in the damn thing. Then like, oh God, here it comes. Forebrain shutting down. I'm like panicking. I'm gonna get through this. And then I'm watching for when I have the impulse to get out. And what I start to notice is that the gaps between those walls start getting longer and longer.
The more you do it.
The more you do it.
You have one at your house?
I do. Yeah, and then pretty soon what's happened is...
How cold is it?
It's hard. I suppose it's probably in the low 50s.
What?
Low 50s or
Why is it so
40s.
warm?
I don't know, low 50s, high 40s.
Yeah. Why do you do that?
Stay in there longer. I don't know. Well, we have two. I confess we have the Morozko one, which is that one's really cold. And that one is...
You avoid that one.
Sometimes.
Look
I
at
like
you.
to go in the sauna first.
I don't like what I'm hearing.
Well, here's the thing. I've been doing longer exposure in the warmer one.
That's so much easier, though.
It is.
We had one here that was kind of broken. And it was at 54 degrees.
Okay, that's
and I climbed
too warm.
in. I'm like, this is a fucking joke. What, 50's okay, though?
All right. Listen.
34.
34
That's
is where
what
you're
I
at.
like.
Yeah, you and Kim Haynes.
34.
Listen,
I like it where the ice breaks
I just
off
got
the bottom of the thing and floats to the top.
You realize I just uninvited myself on the Cam Haynes hunting trip because he was like, you should come hunting. I've never gone. But I think he'll probably just say I'm a wuss until I get down to the 30s on these cold plunges.
No.
I did a workout with him. I went up there. I was sore for 2 weeks. Those high rep weight workouts, they're insane.
Yeah, he does a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. Like, I'm a slow, lazy bear in the gym. Like, I like to lift heavy, rest, go, like, this kind of thing.
Well, he does a lot of endurance work.
Right.
He does a lot of his stuff is about muscular endurance and pain threshold and, what you can tolerate. It's all repetitions. Because repetitions, like, if you just do 3 to 5 reps, it's pretty easy. As you said, testosterone rewards, that kind of effort. There's a big difference between that kind of stuff and, like, he's an ultramarathon runner. He likes to push the mind.
Yeah. Well, I'll do the long runs. I do a long run on Sunday. I did 2 hours yesterday around. They call it a lake, but it looks like more like a river to me.
It is a river.
Okay.
It's a branch of the Colorado River.
So I kept going around that thing until I couldn't go around anymore. But I need to go colder. I will get in the ice one.
What is this will need to go? Why don't you just do it?
Well, there are mornings I'll just jump in the cold one for 30 seconds.
I do it every fucking day. I don't have any negotiation. No. There's no negotiation.
No, I'm not saying I don't go in every day. I'm saying I don't always go into that one first.
I go first thing in the morning.
Okay. Well, you're a better man.
No, it's not a better man. It's just do it. It's just if you have like all this negotiation room and all this leeway, then you won't do it. If you just, I brush my teeth every day. Do you?
Twice a day?
Yeah. Well, get in the fucking cold. Just do it.
All right, I'll start going.
Just do it. It's 3 minutes. But in the beginning when I first got it, I would like procrastinate. I'd get a cup of coffee, and then I looked down at my phone. It was 12 minutes later. I was like, I already be done.
Okay.
I would have been done 8 minutes ago.
Well, I'm going to get thermometers, a second thermometer for the sauna, verify. I'm going to verify the data, second independent measurement, and the cold. I may have to imagine that the Morozko one, because it has pieces of ice floating in it, has got to be colder than 50.
Yeah, I bet it is. You could tell if the Morozko has 2 lids. You have the lid where you climb in, and there's another lid where the equipment is. If you lift up that equipment lid, you'll see a thermometer.
Okay.
You'll see a digital thermometer that's a setting. It's like what it's set at and what it's actually at.
Okay.
And I guarantee you're probably in the 30s.
Okay. So I've been doing shorter exposures there, and then longer exposures in the 51.
What's the longer in the 51?
Well, I'm in there a while.
Like how long?
So that one, when I go in there, I'm staying 10, 20 minutes. And here's the reason. The study that was published in the European Journal of Physiology that showed these huge increases in dopamine, that was the first of these sorts of studies. I don't know if I've mentioned this, but when you go in the cold for a very brief period of time, 1 to 3 minutes, and it's shockingly cold, you have to catch your breath, stabilize your mind, that evokes a dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine release. These 3 things together are called the catecholamines. Those normally would increase from a cup of coffee and a hard sprint for 10 to 30 minutes, maybe an hour. When you do the cold exposure the way you're doing it, or longer exposures at about 50 degrees or so, you're seeing increases in dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine that are 2 to 3x above baseline. This is huge.
Wow.
This is huge. This is on the order of many drugs. But the difference is most drugs spike dopamine and then drop it below baseline. The increases in this case are lasting many hours, 2 to 4 to even 6 hours.
That's amazing.
And they're whenever people criticize deliberate cold exposure, they go, it's not leading to that much fat loss. Granted. But to my knowledge, there is no drug, nor is there any form of exercise, conventional forms of exercise, that increase the catecholamines to that level for that long. And with dopamine, it's all about the amplitude and the duration, how fast it rises, how fast it stays up there. There's nothing quite like it. And, I did 3 plunges here. I'm staying at a place that actually has a plunge. I don't know the temperature, but it felt cold to me. So I did 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, and they had a hot tub, so I bounced back and forth for a minute in between. And as you know, you feel better much of the day, if not the entire day. That is not a coincidence. Your system is circulating much higher levels of the catecholamines. And this is shown in that paper. It's now been shown in a series of other papers. My colleague Craig Heller at Stanford has known this for a long time. And this is why, and for other reasons, the athletes at Stanford who use cold do it before their workouts.
Yeah.
Everyone now knows that it blocks hypertrophy if you do it after.
But if you wait a few hours, you're okay.
4 to 6 hours, you're probably fine.
Yeah. I like to do it first thing in the morning just because I don't want to do it first thing in the morning. And that's why I like when people complain about cold plunges. That it's not worth it, it doesn't do anything. I'm like, fuck you, it doesn't. You just don't like the fact that other people can do it every day. And you don't like the fact that you can't do it every day.
You're talking to me specifically?
No, other
okay.
people.
Yeah.
Not you, you do. But there's people out there that will complain about something and find an excuse why it's not beneficial.
Right.
And the reason for that excuse is not that there's not data. The reason for that excuse is coming up with some sort of an excuse for themselves That's what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that I think of health and performance, so mental health, physical health, and performance along, fundamentals. You talk about these all the time. I think the 5 pillars, if you will, are sunlight, if I may, getting light in your eyes.
Yeah.
Avoiding too frequent bright light exposure in your eyes at night, unless you're doing something you really enjoy. Okay, so you're doing comedy. You're out past 10 p.m., right? You're not going to wear sunglasses or something necessarily.
That would be ridiculous.
It'd be ridiculous, right? It's like, yeah.
People would go, what the fuck is this weirdo doing with sunglasses on? Well, it's past 10 p.m. I have to have my blue blockers on.
I've got friends that wear the red lights at night and dim all the lights, that whole thing. That's a little extreme. It's a little extreme.
Those people are always weird.
Yeah, but sunlight during the day, morning and day, and trying to limit bright light exposure at night as much as is normally possible. Then I would say movement. So you got to move. Cardiovascular and resistance training. That's one of the beautiful things I think that's happened in the last couple of decades is that it's, resistance training is no longer just considered the thing that football players and bodybuilders do. Right. Everyone, old, young, female, male. Women no longer, I hope, are concerned about getting, quote unquote, too big from weightlifting or something or turning into a bodybuilder.
I think that's kind of gone away.
I like to think that's gone away.
Most women realize that the only reason why women do get too big is they take exogenous hormones. Yeah. They're taking steroids.
Yeah, you throw a bunch of Anavar in there, you get the square jaw. And
that's what they want to avoid.
Yeah.
But women who don't do that and who lift weights regularly look way better.
They look way better, and our friend Peter Attia, I mean, has talked about one of the major causes of death later is, falls due to stepping down off things. Inability to hang from a bar is, correlated with lack of health, right, in men and women. So being able to have some strength. So exercise, then nutrients, right? Macronutrients, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. People now think about it. So you need all that stuff, vitamins, minerals, and then the other stuff. And then I think in addition to that, sleep, right? I think Matt Walker deserves a tremendous debt of gratitude from everybody because 10 years ago, everyone was like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Now we know you're probably not going to dissolve into a puddle of your own tears from a couple of bad nights' sleep every once in a while, but sleep makes you mentally, physically better. You perform better. And then the last one is this whole, not notion, it's social connection, right? You can't stay isolated constantly or people lose their minds.
Yeah.
So when you look at people that get very depressed or they're suicidal, one or several of those 5 things is going to be diminished. And then what happens is people hear about deliberate cold exposure, and if they don't like it or they want to poke at it, they say, oh, it blocks hypertrophy. Okay, well, only if you do it in the 4 to 6 hours after a hypertrophy workout.
I thought it was 2.
Well, they've looked immediately after, again.
Immediately after is bad.
Immediately
so if you work out, but you can do it after cardio, right?
Yeah.
Like the only time I do it right after workouts is after I do generally I do a really hard cardio workout, and then I'll do the sauna for 25 minutes, and then I'll do the cold plunge. I'll end with the cold plunge.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that
that's okay, right?
Right. I mean, it lowers inflammation, which is what you want from the resistance training.
Right.
Again, it goes back to this.
Yeah.
It wasn't just these guys, but I point to Lane and to Andy Galpin, who've been shouting from the rooftops for years. Blood pressure up, inflammation up is a good thing. So you have to be careful when someone says, "Oh, you eat the hormetic effect. You eat this, you become inflamed." Well, how long and what's the hormetic effect? And so, in terms of deliberate cold exposure, people like to say, oh, it doesn't burn much fat, it blocks hypertrophy. But if you look at the mental benefits of having your catecholamines, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine, systemically elevated to 2 to 3x for 4 to 6 hours after a 30-second to 3-minute protocol, you're not going to show me a drug or a form of exercise that can do that.
For me, the best thing for sleep is sauna. Like sauna pre-sleep is amazing.
Well, do you know why that is?
Why is that?
It's really interesting. When you heat the surface of your body, you would think, my whole body temperature is getting really hot. But if I were to measure your core body temperature, what happens is your medial preoptic nucleus of the hypothalamus says, oh, the surface of my body is really hot. I'm going to cool down my core temperature. And falling asleep at night requires a 1 to 3 degree drop in bodily temperature. And when you wake up in the morning, you have a 1 to 3 degree increase in bodily temperature in the morning. That triggers a cortisol spike. That triggers norepinephrine. And then you start waking up. So body temperature and the ability to fall asleep and stay asleep and wake up are very tightly correlated. But your whole circadian rhythm is temperature driven. And so, for instance, you probably have a best time of day for you to work out where you feel best. You probably, if I were to have you train at 2 a.m. when you went to bed at a couple hours before, you'd feel miserable. You're not going to perform as well. Grip strength in the middle of the night. I wake you up, I take your grip strength measurement. It's going to be strong, but not as strong as it would be at your peak time during the day. If we looked at your body temperature, we'd find that your grip strength is weakest when your body temperature is lowest. So you'd say, well, I'm asleep. That's why. But there's an easy experiment. This has been done. We just keep you awake for 24 hours. We measure your body temperature. It has a very regular circadian rhythm. That persists. And we measure grip strength. That's been done numerous times. People living in caves, they've done those experiments.
Have they done experiments where people do the sauna and then work out? Because of grip strength, and it's tied to body temperature. If you can raise your core body temperature from the sauna,
sauna's dropping your core body temperature.
The inside of it.
Yeah.
But even while you're at peak sauna, you're sweating like a pig.
So at some point, you won't be able to thermoregulate anymore, and then your body temperature will go up, and you can become hyperthermic.
So when you are in the sauna and it's 210 degrees and you're sweating like a pig, your body temperature is lower?
Your core body temperature is fighting to get lower, and when you get out, your core body temperature continues to go down. It
plummets.
That's right. And the exact opposite happens when you get in the cold plunge. You feel cold on the surface, so your body goes, oh shit. Hypothalamus, again, medial preoptic area, gets a signal from, if you think about how beautiful this mechanism is, I still get goosebumps, no pun intended, when I think about it. You have receptors on your skin surface that sense cold. Send that to your hypothalamus, which says, it's cold out there. I'm gonna generate heat. How do I generate heat? Well, there are two things you can do. I can make you shiver, which will generate heat, or I can make you move. Shivering is just another form of moving. Or I can activate this very specialized fat tissue, which is not under the skin, it's not subcutaneous fat, but it's around your critical organs, which is the brown fat. Activate the mitochondria there, and basically at that very core level, get electrons moving, and the brown fat in turn activates the thermogenic system and starts heating you up.
Wow.
It's so crazy. And then what's beautiful is that the brown fat has a sort of memory of that experience. So even after you get out, you're walking around right now. I did cold plunge this morning. You did cold plunge this morning, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so your body temperature is about 1 to 3 degrees hotter, probably about 1 or 2 degrees hotter than it normally would be. Dopamine's getting cranked out. And so all day long, you're warmer at, let's say, cool ambient temperature. In fact, in Scandinavia, I learned this in researching the Soberg work. I went in and went deep into this cold thermogenesis world over there that they've been researching this really carefully. And they have a saying in Norway, I obviously don't know it in Norwegian, but it translates to essentially, in the spring, as it's getting warmer in Texas, what you want to do is to put on more layers. Why? So that you can prepare yourself for being able to cool yourself off easily in the summer when it's really hot. You'll be more comfortable in the heat of summer in Texas if you bundle up a bit more in the spring.
Really?
Yeah. Well, you're adapting. And then they say the opposite,
too. That sounds annoying.
But then they say in the fall, what you're supposed to do is not walk around with a sweater. You wear a T-shirt, and then guess what? In the winter, you're thermogenically...
How about just fucking wear clothes for the weather? This is ridiculous. Well, yeah, I get the whole idea of sauna and cold plunge and adapting your body, but now we're just, I think too much of this is mental masturbation with some people.
Let me be clear. It's the principle. Yeah. It's the principle.
I understand the science behind it.
Yeah, I'm not saying wear a sweatshirt in the spring.
Just wear what's comfortable. Jesus Christ.
What I'm saying is that when Jamie's laughing. He's from Ohio. They're just like, this is ridiculous. It's cold enough out there. You don't need to plunge.
I'm from Boston.
Well,
Same thing.
I think the principle is what's interesting, right?
Yes, it is interesting.
If you teach your body to tolerate warm, then you will be more comfortable in very hot. It's sort of obvious.
Yeah.
And vice versa for cold.
Well, I certainly think that there's a great benefit to being able to tolerate temperatures, whether it's cold temperature or warm temperature, because I think there's a mental resiliency aspect to it.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is when I get out of the cold, my entire body, my skin is bright red. Where your body's trying to heat itself up because you're in there for 3 minutes, or I'm in there for 3 minutes. But when I get out of the sauna, generally I stretch, and my house is warm, right? And at nighttime, I do the sauna in the house. And when I'm stretching, within a minute or 2 minutes after the sauna, I'm fucking freezing because my body's trying to cool off so quickly. Because it's gone through the whole 25-minute session.
Well, the contrast of heat and cold is, we know very good for our cardiovascular system because we think of the blood vessels and capillaries and arteries as just tubes, but they're really cells, endothelial cells. They're laid out like silly putty, linking them all like tubes, and they are very contractile. They need to do that because of the pulsing of blood through them. That's the whole basis of systolic and diastolic blood pressure. It's the top measurement. It's a pressure when it's not blood pumping through, and it's pressure when it's relaxed, okay? So this system can become very dynamic. You don't want it rigid, especially given, what Attia tells us, and I believe him, is that the number one killer in the world is cardiovascular disease or cerebrovascular disease. You want the little microcapillaries of your body to be very flexible, not rigid. So when you go heat cold, you're basically going vasoconstriction, dilation, vasoconstriction.
But
dilation.
I'm not talking about heat cold. I'm just talking about heat and stretching. Just getting out of it. My body cools itself off, and I get really cold within like 5 minutes.
So that could be the drop, which is when your blood goes to the center of your body to preserve your core organs, and then the surface of your body is cold, and then as you start to heat up again, and there's vasodilation, and it goes out to the surface, your surface is cold, and it actually cools the blood at the surface, and that's what's called the drop. And that's when your body temperature goes down. Now, once you put on clothes and head to your workout or head to work, what's going to happen is your body temperature is now going to increase more quickly. It normally would do that anyway early in the day. As you wake up, your body temperature goes up, 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 up. And then whenever you achieve a sort of a dip in energy in the afternoon, there's probably one time in the afternoon, whether or not you need a nap or not, that you feel a little bit lethargic, and then you kind of come back. That represents the peak in your body temperature for 24 hours. In fact, most people, if they want to figure out their sort of optimal bedtime, I know this gets pretty down in the weeds, you just look at that number. So maybe it's 3 o'clock, and you say about 7 hours after that, plus or minus an hour. That's probably when somebody should go to sleep. How do I know that? Because that's when body temperature starts dropping by 1 to 3 degrees. So doing cold early in the day makes total sense. Doing deliberate cold exposure before a workout, total sense. Doing sauna before sleep, total sense.
The cold in the morning, the other thing that it does when I get out is it makes me like really fucking happy, which is what you were talking about with the dopamine raise. It's so significant. I mean, it is a joy of life feeling. And then as I start my workout, I generally start really slow. I just do like a lot of like shadow boxing, and maybe I'll skip a little rope to try to get my blood up. And then once I do that for a few minutes, then I have a series of 100 push-ups and 100 body weight squats that I do every day. So I go through that, and that's my warm-up for everything else, because it's pretty low stress, low impact, very easy to do. And then by the time the 100 squats and 100 push-ups are done, I'm warm. And then I start whatever workout I'm going to do. But god damn, I feel happy.
Yeah, well, that's
the people that are trying to avoid it because, fucking, it doesn't do anything. And you shut up. Just do it. Stop your excuses and stop arguing about it. You're only arguing about it because you don't want to experience discomfort. I know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. We all know what you're doing. Shut the fuck up. Just get in there. Just do it. It's great for everybody. And if you can't fucking handle it, don't talk about it. But don't pretend that it's not good for you. It's nonsense. It's one of the most, you could sell that shit in a pill, it would be so valuable. I mean, how many people are on SSRIs and they're like, I kind of feel better?
Well, first of all, I completely agree with you. Completely agree. And I'm not again, Craig Heller in our biology department at Stanford has been talking in this general theme for a long time. Anna Lemke, who you had on here, talked about patients of hers who got sober using cold plunges. You say, well, how do they get sober using cold plunges? You just, taking one addiction and replacing it with another? No. What's very clear is that when you're suffering or you're lazy or you're procrastinating, doing something that's harder than the state that you're in bounces you back much faster.
Yes.
This is all based in the dynamics of dopamine. It's sort of crazy. If you know how people are procrastinating to write something and they start cleaning the house? Yeah. Something they normally don't want to do. Well, it's just something that's easier than the thing that you're supposed to do.
Right.
It turns out, and I learned this from Anna, if you do something that's even harder than the thing that you're trying to avoid, all of a sudden you're able to do that. And you're like, oh, okay, well, it's just psychology, right? No, it's not psychology alone. It's psychology, but once dopamine is deployed at that level, you're a different person. And I know this because if you take someone's dopamine and lower it, that makes them depressed. That gives them, if you lower it even more and give them movement disorder, Parkinson's. If you give them their dopamine back, their focus increases. How do I know that? There's a reason there's an ADHD drug shortage right now. Ritalin, Adderall, they all tap into this system, the dopaminergic and adrenaline norepinephrine system. So one of the most prescribed and overprescribed classes of drugs is the drug designed to try and get exactly this effect of cold plunges. And so I completely agree. If people would just take a very cold shower or a very cold plunge, or a little bit longer at 50 degrees, but although I agree with you that shorter, colder is better. What I didn't describe, and I'm not trying to rescue myself here, but I do that daily. But then on Tuesdays is the typical day where I do very, very hot and very, very cold back and forth for well over an hour back and forth.
Yeah, you do that serious growth hormone increasing protocol.
I'm trying to condition myself to really be able to tolerate heat and cold. The other thing I learned, again, from Susanna, I take no credit for this, is, and I'm not suggesting people replace the cold plunge with this or a cold shower with this. You're starting to see more of this on social media, and it's embarrassingly silly to think that that's a replacement, what I'm about to describe as a replacement for cold plunges. But if you put, she taught me, she said, if you even just put a small portion of your skin in ice cold water, like your hand or your arm, you actually activate the brown fat system. That's how robust this system of surface temperature to body is. And so I don't think it's a good replacement, but now you're seeing people saying, oh, you just have to put your face in a bowl of ice water.
There was a device that was going around a while back that people were using when they were lifting weights, where they were putting their hand into something that was freezing their hand, and it increased their ability to do work quite substantially. Do you know what I'm talking about?
So this was developed by Craig Heller's lab. It's called the Cool Mitt. It's a bit controversial, and I'll tell you why. So you have, on the surface of your hands, on the bottoms of your feet, and on your upper face, you have what's called glabrous skin. It's the only skin on your body that's incapable of growing hair because there are no hair stem cells there. It's also the place where, believe it or not, it goes, normally things go.
Yeah, I don't really like that.